What's going on, guys? It's NFreak back, and I'm here to do my first hardware review of the Game Boy Advance Micro, which I actually just recently got. And this thing was released around September of 2005, which was just about a year after the original Nintendo DS came out. And that explains why this was somewhat of a flop for Nintendo. This was advertised to be a console for the cool kids out there, you know, those kids like tweens and stuff that wanted to have a Game Boy but they were too cool for that. But yeah, this was released, and this particular model, which is the Special Famicom Edition, was released around December of 2005, and it was a limited edition. But let's look at the console itself. Now, you can see why Nintendo would advertise this for the teen market, because it actually looks really nice. It's pretty shiny, and the buttons feel like Nintendo DS Lite buttons if you've played with that, or if you have that. And you've got all your regular buttons that's on a Game Boy Advance. The speaker's right here, which the speaker isn't that great, but it's fine. You've got your headphone jack down here. This is the power switch right here. Your Game Boy slot right here. And here's the back of the unit. It's actually metal, which actually looks really good. It's a very well-built console. And I find that for most Nintendo products, they are well-built. But let's get to this side. This is actually the volume switch right here. It's kind of like the Nintendo DSi, where it's actually digital, and you press it. And then you've got the two shoulder buttons up here. Now, the one thing that I kind of found odd about the shoulder buttons, you can't actually press it on this side right here. The button's actually located right here. But after playing with it for a little bit, I found that it was actually more comfortable to actually press up here than out here anyway. So it's not that big of a deal. And then you've got your little charge port right there, which is different from every other charger that came out. Now, this thing is very, very small. When I first got it, I was surprised how small it was. And if you turn it on, I'll turn on for a second. You see you've got some LED lights down here for the start and select buttons. That actually shows the power usually. If it turns red, that means you're low on power. And as you can see here, the light is actually, it has a backlight, which the original Game Boy Advance did not have, and the Game Boy Advance SP actually only got till later. You can adjust the brightness just like the DSi and DS Lite if you press L and press the volume buttons. And overall, this is actually a very, very nice console, and it looks very good. It feels good in your hands playing. But there are a couple downsides to this. The Game Boy Advance slot can't actually play the older Game Boy Color and Game Boy original games like the older Game Boy Advance Game Boy Advance consoles could. That's pretty much the biggest downside of this console, in my opinion, is that it can't play the older Game Boy Color games. Now, the rest of the system is pretty good. The other complaint that some people may have is that the screen is too small. This is a 2-inch screen. The other Game Boy Advance and Game Boy Advance SPs had 3-inch screens, so this is quite a bit smaller in comparison. But if you want just a really small console to take around and play your Game Boy Advance games on, it's a pretty good system. Now, I just wanted to compare this to a couple other consoles just to show you how small it actually is. Let's take the original Game Boy Advance out. This is probably like 3/4 the size of the original Game Boy Advance. You can see it's really small. Then let's look at the original Game Boy Color. This is a lot smaller in comparison to this as well. It's just really small. Now let's look at the original Game Boy. Now this thing was pretty big in and of itself, but when you compare it to the Game Boy Micro, it looks like a giant. It's huge. Now we'll get to the Game Boy Advance SP. When opened up, you can see it's much smaller. The screen is much bigger there. And then Nintendo DS. Whoops. This thing looks tiny compared to everything. How about a Neo Geo Pocket Color? Yep, it's smaller than that too. This is probably the smallest game console you'll ever find. What about a PSP? Yep, it's smaller than that too. Now the real question is the Game Boy Micro smaller than Yoshi? I think it is. As you can see, this thing is very small. Now, I wouldn't go out and buy this on eBay or anything if you had the option, because in my opinion, the Game Boy Advance SP is the better model, and this thing is good if you want to just get something for collectors, but the Game Boy Advance SP is the better handheld for Game Boy Advance because it can play the original Game Boy games and Game Boy Color games as well. But overall, it's a very good system, and it feels good, it plays well, and everything works great on it. So thanks for watching, and if you want more hardware reviews, I can definitely do them. Just request them if you want. But thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you later.